Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we will be talking about a pretty intense winter storm, actually very intense winter storm that will be developing in the coming days. Now this thing is around 24 to 48 hours kind of before really reaching its kind of maximum, and it really hasn't even formed yet. So it's definitely going to be a very quick developer, but its impacts are going to be far felt. And I am particularly concerned about this system, not necessarily because of its snowy side or its precipitation, but because of the cold temperatures that this will bring very, very far into the United States, delivering first frosts and freezes as deep as, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and that could go, into the central and southern parts of those states even. So yes, a very early frost and freeze for those areas, and further up north we could have a very heavy snow in some areas and even colder temperatures, some areas in the teens. So this system is going to be a very interesting one. It's a very unique setup, but I'm kind of excited to show you it. So let's just start off by looking at the European model. I do believe this model has probably the better handle on it compared to the other models, though all of them have done a pretty decent job with this system and they've been relatively consistent. So as I put this into motion, notice what the European model does. So this is right now what we have going on across the United States. This is Saturday, 18Z, so around 7 o'clock in the afternoon. And you can see that, oh, not 7, sorry, this is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. When I'm recording it, it is 7. And that's pretty much what we have going on. You may think there's that storm, right? It's not. It hasn't even formed yet. A few key things I want to point out before I keep moving this forward. What we do have is this very invasive push of cold air. Sorry, let me go back here. And that is going to be a key part in this. So we have a high pressure. It is pushing cold air in this direction, right? You can see those blue lines. And you can see that it is, you can't really see the high pressure yet. It'll move in here and shortly and you'll see it. But as it moves in here, it wants to, bring its cold air with it. And that's fine. That's what usually happens with high pressures. However, we start seeing a low pressure that's developing here. And let me go and show you that now. And that really kind of makes this storm into a way bigger problem than it normally would have been if it did develop just by itself. Notice that by tomorrow in the morning hours, we see a lot of activity already here, if you will, sprouting. We see a low pressure right there starting to kind of close off an area of circulation. And by noon tomorrow, or sorry, late afternoon hours, we see very vividly you see that 516 line. It's spearheading this cold air very quickly into the United States. However, it starts, and there's that high pressure, it starts slowing down quite significantly. And I do want to mention high pressures in the northern hemisphere spin clockwise, so with the clock. So what that means is in the context of this thing, which you can see the high pressure is very large, it's bringing it's cold, yeah, in this fashion. These are kind of the winds that are coming from this way. Yeah, bad arrows, but I just want to exemplify and show you that all these lines, you can see the winds are coming and streaming from the north, not from the south. If this was a low pressure, that would be from the south. Now, as I put this forward, what we do start seeing very quickly is, again, an area of circulation that develops, a lot of showers, a lot of activity. These winds, which would normally, again, be, dragging pretty quickly down towards the south and east, start slowing down, not the wind, sorry, just the actual high pressure, and they start condensing. It's kind of like two magnets. You bring them closer together of the opposite ends, and they really start resisting each other. And you've probably done that before, placed two magnets, and it's really hard to make them touch, especially if they're stronger magnets. And this is what happens with this setup. You can see that by early Monday morning now. So again, this is around 48 hours out from current time, what I'm showing you right here. And what we have here is a high pressure. It's spinning its wind from the north, right? It really wants to shove further and further to the south and especially east. But because of this low pressure that is vigorously spinning the other direction, it's not allowed to do that. And what is resulting is this extreme intensification of winds right across the lakes of Superior and into Michigan and just generally all across these areas. Now, this doesn't mean that the high pressure can't put its cold air into the far south. It actually helps this high pressure out spread its cold air. I guess that's assuming that's what the high pressure's main, I guess, goal is, which, let's just say that it is for this case. And do note that because of this vortex that creates here, or not vortex, just these extremely strong alley of strong winds, northerly winds, it pumps this cold air way more further south than it normally would have. Normally, if there wasn't any obstacle with this motion of this high pressure, it would have probably dragged, maybe clipped to the northeastern United States and moved on forward. But because of that, let me quickly show you again that storm develops. You can see it develops a nasty cold front. This cold air really plunges far south into the United States. That 540 line is where the 32-degree line usually lies. And you can see that by late Tuesday afternoon, that is pushing deep into the southern United States. Again, central Georgia, central Alabama, Mississippi. And here's actually a little glitch that shows us this shouldn't be happening. They should show the precip overlay as well. But it's actually beneficial because it just shows you very evidently that those blue lines, and how cold of an air this is, and it becomes almost completely cut off, you could see from the main flow. So that would prolong kind of its impacts. It does eventually move out decently quickly, relative to what it could have done. Thankfully, it moves out quickly, and there it goes out. So yeah, that was a lot of information to take in, but it's something that's truly fascinating. So again, here is the kind of the hourly layout. So Sunday in the afternoon hours, we start seeing showers and snow showers develop across the northern United States. We do see some lake effect showers already occurring. We see some very cool temperatures moving in and winds intensifying, especially across the western Great Lakes. Now, as I push this into Sunday overnight and into Monday, start the beginning of the work week, we see this high pressure develop. We see a lot of snow on the northern side. We see some nasty squalls on the southern side, and across Lake Superior, and especially the UP of Michigan, northern Wisconsin, we see very heavy snow. And the reason for this is because we have very strong northerly cold winds going over relatively warm lake waters. It is very early in the year for lake effect. It is in mid-October, and that is exactly perfect what you want. You want colder winds across warmer waters, and you get lake effect. And with such strong winds and such concentrated kind of force power because of this high pressure colliding with this low pressure, we see incredible rates of snow potentially occurring here. And some of this snow could be falling all along the Wisconsin line into Illinois, so there could be quite a bit of areas impacted by this snow. But again, as I mentioned, I'm not too particularly concerned about the snow as I am about the cold and how far reaching south it will be. Notice that this low pressure is pretty stagnant. It's slow moving. The snow continues across the lakes. Again, you can see a lot of mixing here. There shows some pink, some green. You could expect that with these heavier bands, there will be grapple, kind of a melted snow rain mix. You could search up videos of online, and you could just search up, grapple snow squall or lake effects snow squall. There are videos on YouTube that show, 1 inch to 2 inches of that stuff accumulating in 20 minutes. That stuff's powerful and intense, so it's definitely not to be underestimated. Notice we also have a very significant cold front that starts developing. Thankfully, it's offshore for the most part, but it does end up clipping portions of the Northeast, and you can see especially Maine and southeastern Canada. And then again, it becomes pretty evident that the worst part of this is that cool air. So now let me go back and show you on this model, or this website, the same exact model, but let's focus on its 2-meter temperature anomalies. This gives us a good look of kind of the displacement of temperatures, right? So if it's 40 degrees across Minnesota and it should be 50, it will show up as -10 in that coloration, right? So it shows us based on history how warm or cold it should be, and what the actual temperature we'll be doing at that time. So notice quickly into Monday, we see this cool air spill in. At the beginning, it doesn't look necessarily too bad, and that's true because this type of, the magnitude of the cold air across the northern United States is something you would more typically see across October. It's just once we start seeing this push far and deep into the United States because of those, again, that extreme alley that is created by that high pressure and low pressure, we see these anomalies arise, right? So think about this in this perspective. You have, say, an air mass that has 50 degrees temperatures. That's what it's bringing, right? And you have Minnesota that averages 55. That air mass will only, produce an anomaly of 5 degrees of cooler temperatures across Minnesota. Now, assuming that this, cooled down, maintains its magnitude of cold air at 50 degrees, and it moves down all the way into Alabama, and central Alabama's average is 75, then you have a 25-degree anomaly, even though it's the same magnitude of the cold air. So that's, it doesn't necessarily have to intensify, it just needs to stay the same as it pushes down into areas that typically don't see such cold air. And we see that. But we also see a pretty good intensification with this band as it continues pumping much more cold air than it normally would, and much further south than it normally would, resulting in some of these anomalies approaching 10, 20, even 25 to 30 degrees below average, especially for the southern states here. Now this may seem a bit welcoming for a lot of these areas. Oh, some nice cool relief. This is going to be a bit concerning, as a lot of anything, orchards, farms, anything that kind of depend are really closely monitored. These first frosts and freezes will be unpleasantly surprised with one that is way ahead of the schedule for these southern states. And again, this will be some cold that we haven't seen in potentially ever, as there could be records broken across the south, the deep south here. And do note that this maintains itself for a while. I mean, you can see majority of the United States east of the Rockies is under this cool down. It is rather progressive, thankfully, so it moves out decently quickly, though you can see by next weekend there are still some signs of it hanging around the East Coast. So that is what the European shows. Let me show you the GFS. I will get to the actual temperatures in just a second. But again, it's just incredible. It starts off, definitely a cool down. But that, again, that rare setup of that high pressure slamming into a developing low pressure really, really puts these anomalies at incredible magnitude. And again, the GFS is even more aggressive with this. And it's actually interesting because over the last few days, the GFS has been more aggressive than the European. And it seems as if the European has been trending more towards what the GFS is showing in terms of these magnitudes. You can see some of these are really getting towards, the 25 to 30 degrees below average in terms of Fahrenheit, Celsius, anywhere from 16 to 20. So impressive cold. And now let me show you and go back using the GFS, because quite frankly I do think it has a better temperature handle over the European on this. Let's show this. So this is 7 a.m. Sunday, so this is tomorrow, right? Notice south, you're still pretty warm, actually very hot, so you'll kind of want that cold air at that time, but you'll soon regret it as you realize how cold this cold air will actually get. Notice October 17th, Monday, we start seeing frost, 20s, teens across the Midwest. Definitely chilly for these locations. During the day, many areas not getting above 40 and 50. It's encroaching on the south pretty quickly. By Tuesday, Monday night into Tuesday, frost freezes are across Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, pretty far to the south, and you can see even reaching potentially northern Georgia, Mississippi already on Tuesday, on Monday into Tuesday, and that's not even the coldest day yet. Notice during the day, a lot of these areas won't be even getting above 40s and 50s across the south. Across the Midwest, 30s and 40s. Definitely chilly and way colder than it should be. Notice that by Tuesday night and into Wednesday, we start seeing some of these frosts and freezes. Anywhere in that blue, that's a freeze, and a frost is anywhere really 34 degrees or lower. So pretty much getting all the way almost to the coastline, according to the GFS here, with some frosts. So yeah, definitely way ahead of schedule. And yeah, we haven't had our first frost yet. I do believe that for my particular area, I'm pretty close to the lake, so it's been shielding us. We've gotten, I think, 35 degrees. So, we could expect to see some 20s here. So that's definitely going to be an unpleasant blast of cold air here as well. And yeah, you can see that some of these temperatures really stick around for a while. And even once the frost threat is over, there's going to be just some cool temperatures across the eastern United States. So this is really something that doesn't happen too often. It's honestly really cool to see it happen, but it's also a bit concerning, obviously, because of how early this frost and freeze will be occurring for these areas. Let me show you now some of the snowfall amounts that some of these models are pumping out. Let's go to the European and put it at next Friday. So this system is pretty much done with. And let's see what the snowfall footprint that it could leave behind. Again, it's going to be not as impressive as the cold air itself. Still, though, you could see areas, especially near the lakes. I don't want to underestimate this. Some of these squalls, it takes a few hours. They could deliver a few inches. You can see some of these 10-inch amounts across, close to Erie. I don't know if that's particularly going to be the case. Though I don't want to underestimate it, because lake effect has those characteristics where it could quickly pump out a few inches of snow. Where I am most confident about heavy snow occurring is the province of Ontario, and especially eastern Ontario, with amounts, potentially a foot, even a foot and a half, maybe in some areas even closer to 2 feet. And the UP of Michigan, where I think there could easily be amounts well over a foot. Yes, over a foot. And you can see, Marquette could be in that with 6-7 inches. And even the eastern shores, of like western shores of Lake Michigan could be seeing some snow. That includes cities like Chicago, Milwaukee, and don't be surprised to see some scattered snowflakes or showers across Ohio, Indiana, and Pennsylvania. And yeah, that kind of shows you how early this thing is, because if this was, a month later, we'd be seeing a lot more significant snow footprint pretty much more widespread. It's just, I guess that's the silver lining, that this is still occurring relatively early. But I guess that's also the bad thing, because it's it's still late enough in a year where this first frost could occur across the deep south, and that's not good. I want to now show you a particular model that I really like. It's called the HER model. It goes out 48 hours every 6 hours, and it gives us a really good look at what could potentially be occurring. Let's focus first across these areas, and let's time this out even more precisely, because it goes out 48 hours. It is short term, but it's usually more precise and used for events that are going to be occurring in the short term. So this thing, notice the lines, which again, the tighter they are, the stronger the winds. They're not awfully tight. It's not really, there's not going to be any strong winds really for the next few hours, and it's just insane to think how rapidly this thing will develop. So notice we obviously have cold air here moving in. We see the snow here falling in frozen form. Precip falling in frozen form. And do note that we don't have any signs of low pressure yet. This is tomorrow, 11, 12, 2. So again, this whole event isn't far out. Do note that we start seeing more and more activity start pulling up here, more showers, the winds turning more northerly. And notice that this, in the next 12 to 18 hours here on this weather model, so tomorrow in the afternoon, we quickly start seeing things escalate. We see a low pressure develop. We see this high pressure clearly wanting to push into these areas. We see snow already starting to develop across the UP, and again, you could see those little pockets of even yellows and greens showing on that radar where the rain is. That's, if that converts over into snow, that's going to cause some very impressive snowfall rates. This is prime lake effect production potentially for the UP, maybe even one of the bigger events of the year that we will see, because late on in winter it becomes hard to do that. And notice quickly by late tomorrow, really into the early morning hours of Monday, we start seeing these intense bands of snow develop across Lake Superior. We see very strong winds. You can see they're a lot more packed, these millibars, and notice it sends a decent shot of snow well south across Wisconsin into Green Bay, even Madison, Milwaukee picking up some snow, maybe even northern Illinois, Chicago, and it stops us at hour 48. You can see the winds are clearly very strong. This high pressure is spinning these little showers and storms, and that's the thing I want to focus on. Notice as I take it into NAM 3KM, which agrees with the HER generally speaking, it shows that little wave of snow, kind of the first push through. And look what it starts doing, especially off of Lake Michigan. It starts developing some pretty heavy rain. And you may be surprised at how heavy that is, and you think it's the model overestimating this. And no, quite frankly, when you have a storm this strong with winds off the whole fetch of Lake Michigan, that's very warm, and the winds are very cold air, warm waters, you could definitely easily see either very heavy rain and thunderstorms off the lake, or if it's cold enough, some very strong snow. And you can see that the model is having a hard time predicting where the cold will be. If this even converts to grapple or snow, wet snow for just a few hours, an hour or two, it could easily put a lot of heavy snow across areas that still have leaves, and that could down power lines. This will be a very heavy wet snow if that type of stuff does occur. And then NAM 3KM may be overestimating some of the intensity of this lake effect. But again, with how strong these winds are going to be, how cold they are, and how warm these waters will be, I'm not putting it out of the question that there could be a few spots here that get blasted with heavy snow. And again, it won't be really as widespread here as it will be across the UP. And you can see that the NAM 3KM, if you look at its snowfall accumulations, show well over 2 feet across the UP. I'm not too sure it'll be over 2 feet, though I would not be surprised to see localized amounts over a foot and a half. Notice it shows very heavy snow here across Indiana, Michigan. I don't think there will be 6-7 inches of heavy wet snow. All it takes is 1 to 2, and that could already cause chaos, and I definitely think that's a possibility. The NAM 12KM, it's kind of a less high-res version of the NAM 3KM. You could see it through the whole event, which takes us out to 84 hours. It shows a lot of snow across the UP, a lot across here, and it definitely shows, and especially right there, northern Indiana, potentially concentration of some snow. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some heavier snow amounts across northern Michigan as well. Moving into the northeast, the way these lakes are positioned won't be as primed for lake effect snow development, but don't be surprised if in Cleveland, Erie, Syracuse, Buffalo, you see snowflakes falling, and even some, traces or just downright accumulations of snow. I do also want to focus on the cold front part of this system. Yes, there's a lot of working, pieces here, but the cold front of this system that develops kind of later on and mainly affects the northeast could also have some pretty nasty thunderstorms. So this is kind of the warm side of the storm. Again, let's run this through. Again, the system's intensifying, it's forming, it's very short development period. You can see right there, a lot of this moisture starts to form, and it starts taking on that northerly trajectory. And by 7 a.m. Monday, so again, Monday, starting off your work week, we could start seeing some pretty nasty showers, pretty nasty storms developing across Massachusetts, Connecticut, and as I put on the NAM 3KM model, you could see this pretty clearly. A lot of these almost, kind of supercell-like characteristics will start forming. Again, I don't really think the tornado threat is high with this, but definitely wind and hail is a definite possibility. You can see a lot of the models develop these storms right off the coast. Just a slight little difference, and that can mean, a vast different outcome. So it's something to keep in mind. And it's pretty evident, according to at least the global models, that wherever this front does develop, even if it's offshore, off coast, that obviously it makes a big difference for these areas in regards to their thunderstorm chances. But further up north, it seems that it will impact Maine regardless, with more heavy rain. These areas did get quite a bit of rain with the past event, so this isn't necessarily good. And you can see it's also a relatively slow-moving storm. It could drop quite a bit of rain. And notice that, Wednesday, Thursday, it's still hugging a lot of these areas. And as it's pulling away, there could be a brief window of westerly winds that provide some lake effect for these areas across the northeast and whatnot. So that's definitely something that's going to be interesting. But yeah, this could be a very intense lake effect event for a lot of these areas. It's definitely going to be a curious system. That's the best way to put it. So you can see the European model puts out a footprint of, some areas, even a foot, 2 feet right there, 24 inches. Seems a bit bullish, but I wouldn't put it out of the question, especially if the European model is showing that. Our AP model, it's another good model, very similar to the HER model. It doesn't go out far, but for the time that does go out, it's usually pretty accurate. Notice it shows pretty strong amounts here, and again, only takes us out 51 hours, so it's not the entirety of the system, and it's already showing some pretty decent amounts of snow across Michigan and whatnot. And that's my concern, that we'll see 1 or 2 bands across Michigan, Indiana, maybe even into Ohio setup of Lake Erie, that's less likely of Lake Erie, but even Lake Huron, and we could see, potentially whiteout conditions with some of this. So yeah, it's definitely something that needs to be addressed and kept in the back of the mind. And I am talking about pretty local areas here with this lake effect, but again, the larger spanning impact of this system will be just the incredibly, incredibly cold air. I mean, it's truly something, over the past years, I think there's been 2 to 3 years here in a row in my particular area where we even haven't had a frost or freeze in October, let alone, upper 20s in mid-October. So this is definitely a change around from what's been happening. And look at some of these colorations. Again, this is probably the more aggressive, forecast from the GFS, but really, you look at the European, and it's not that far behind in terms of those anomalies. It's impressive, either model you look at. And again, it affects a large portion of the United States with that cold air. And because it's so early in the season, it makes this particularly concerning. On the National Weather Service Weather Ready Nation map, not a lot of things are issued yet. You can see there are some freeze watches, where cold air could be occurring. Here's the stalled out cold front that eventually the system will take advantage of. You can see it's delivering a lot of heavy rain into Southern California, Arizona, and into portions of Oklahoma and Arkansas, some severe weather. And let's click on a UP, right? Because this is where some of the heaviest snow could be occurring. And I'll click on an area that could be seeing, kind of the epicenter of this snow. And you can see some of these amounts are impressive. 3 to 5, 4 to 7 inches of snow, right? Monday night, even more snow. So these areas could easily be picking up close to a foot, if not more. Easily not more. And I do apologize if you hear a beeping noise in the background. That's the dryer that's finished. These areas could be picking up some nasty snow as well, but the potential is less. If I take a look at South Bend, they're probably mentioning it. Yeah, rain, snow likely. I wouldn't really be putting on snowfall accumulations if I was a National Weather Service, because it's so hard to predict it. And I do believe what they have here is reasonable. And again, one area will be seeing absolutely nothing, maybe just heavy rain, and another area could be transitioning into that heavy snow. And this makes this forecast even more nightmarish, because not only is it lake effect, which is extremely hard to predict, but it's also, whether or not the lake effect will transition into snow. And if it's sustained, if it's a single band that's sustained and starts off as heavy rain, because of the column cooling that could occur from that heavy rain, that could eventually turn over to snow, even if surrounding areas aren't cold enough for snow. So a lot of moving pieces in this storm. And it's gonna be an impressive one. Definitely an impressive storm. I'm really curious to see how this explodes and pans out. But yes, for a good portion of the United States, very cold. Some areas snow, and then for some areas some decently heavy rain. And you can see it's a massive storm. It's a giant. And as we push this out, I do want to say the pattern switches, becomes warm, very warm all of a sudden. So yeah, there's going to be a quick turnaround. But we start seeing storms riding off from the Pacific West, which could lead to some pretty big events across the central United States. And models like the GFS is especially a big proponent of that. And if I show you the MSLP precip frozen, you can see it drags away this system. The one that I'm currently talking about brings in a very, very warm air, and you can see it starts developing some nasty storms, potentially more classic of what you'd see in late fall as compared to what we're seeing now with this system. So yeah, the pattern looks active either way you put it, and it seems like a lot of activity will be brewing. So that is basically it though for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. It's definitely a longer one, but there's a lot of stuff to cover. All right, see ya, guys. Bye.